Slope. Using the slope formula. What is it? The measure of steepness of a line, y, helps you predict what will happen in the future. Interesting fact. Using the broad scaly tail, beavers will forcibly slap the water as an alarm signal to other beavers in the area that a predator is approaching. So here are the 4 examples that we are going to be talking about in today's video. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at example 1. Now let's read the steps. Step 1, label one point as point 1 and the other as point 2. And step 2, follow order of operations. Now let's talk about what slope is. Slope is delta y over delta x. And remember, delta is just a fancy way of saying change in. So you can read that as change in y over the change in x, which is equal to rise over run. And remember, rise is the vertical part and run is the horizontal part, and that is equal to the formula y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Let's read the question. Find the slope of the line given the 2 points 2, 2 and 5, 4. So now we have to decide which one's point 1 and which one's point 2. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's make 2, 2 as point 1 and 5, 4 as point 2. So now we have the formula on the screen. And now all we have to do is substitute each number into the correct spot. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So let's substitute 4 for y2. Let's substitute 2 for y1. Let's substitute 5 for x2. And lastly, let's substitute 2 for x1. Now we've substituted every number into the correct spot. Let's go ahead and do the order of operations. And that gives us 2 over 3. And why is that? Because 4 minus 2 is 2, and 5 minus 2 is 3. So our slope is 2/3. Now let's take a look at the graph with the points already labeled. And let's use delta y over delta x to show you that it is still the same result. And delta y is equal to 2, and delta x is equal to 3. So using the graph, it's the same as the formula. Now you may be wondering what happens if we accidentally choose or decide to choose 5, 4 as point 1 and 2, 2 as point 2. Let's see what happens. So let's go ahead and follow the same pattern and substitute the numbers into the variables and follow the order of operations. So we have 2 for y2, 4 for y1, 2 for x2, and 5 for x1. So we've substituted correctly. Now let's follow the order of operations, and we get negative 2 over negative 3, because 2 minus 4 is negative 2, and 2 minus 5 is negative 3. And whenever we divide two negative numbers, they cancel and they become positive. So we can simplify it to 2 over 3, and that is our slope if we choose 2, 2 as point 2 and the 0.54 as point 1. So 3 different ways of doing the same problem. We all got the same answer, so we knew we did it correctly. Now let's take a look at example 2, where we have the points negative 3, 2 and 1, 2. So let's go ahead and pick negative 3, 2 as point 1 and 1, 2 as point 2. And now we can substitute those numbers into the slope formula to see what we get. So we can substitute 2 for y2. We can substitute 2 for y1. And now we can substitute 1 for x2. And lastly, substitute negative 3 for x1. As you can see, we put the parentheses around the negative number to help visualize that we're substituting a negative number, and it will help with the order of operations. So now let's go ahead and do that. So we get 0 over 1 plus 3. Why? Because 2 minus 2 is 0, and when you're subtracting a negative number, it becomes a positive number. So that's why we have 1 plus 3 on the bottom, and 1 plus 3 is 4. So now we have 0 over 4, and 0 divided by 4 is just 0, and that is our slope for this type of equation or line. So as you can see, the line is completely it doesn't go up or down. So like you can pretend when you are walking on it, you're just walking on a straight line or a straight path, and that is why slope is 0. And now let's check in with delta y and delta x. As you can see, delta y is equal to 0 and delta x is equal to 4. And so 0 divided by 4 is 0. So the graph shows why it is also 0. Now let's see what happens when we flip the 2 points. So negative 3, 2 is now 0.2 and 1, 2 is now 0.1. Let's go ahead and show that process. So we have 2 for y2, 2 for y1, negative 3 for x2, and remember we put the parentheses around the negative number, and lastly we have 1 for x1. Now we've substituted correctly. Let's follow the order of operations. So 2 minus 2 is 0, and then we can go ahead and drop the parentheses because it's not being raised to any power, and so we have negative 3 minus 1 on the bottom, and that gives us negative 4. So now we have 0 divided by negative 4, and that gives us 0 as well. And that is our answer for if we decide to do it the other way. Now we've done it 3 times, or 3 different ways, and we got 0 each time. So we know we did it correctly. Now let's take a look at example 3, where we have the points negative 3, negative 2, and negative 3, 1. So let's go ahead and label negative 3, negative 2 as 0.1 and negative 3, 1 as 0.2. We have the slope formula on there already. So let's go ahead and substitute. So we can substitute 1 for y2. We can substitute negative 2 for y1. Remember the parentheses. And now we can go ahead and substitute negative 3 for x2. Remember the parentheses. And we can substitute negative 3 for x1. And lastly, remember the parentheses. So now we can go ahead and do the order of operations. Now since we have substituted each number into the right spot. And the next step is we have 1 plus 2 over negative 3 plus 3. Because remember, when we're subtracting a negative number, we have 2 negatives in a row, so they become positive. And now we can go ahead and say, now we have 3 over 0 because 1 plus 2 is 3 and negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And 3 divided by 0 gives us undefined. And that is the answer for this type of line or equation, and that is the slope which is undefined. And if we take a look at the graph on the left hand side, now let's take a look at delta y and delta x, where we have delta y is equal to 3 and delta x is equal to 0, and so 3 divided by 0 is going to give us undefined. You can kind of think about it where that line is the edge of or the wall of a building. So you can't really walk up a wall on the building, and since you can't really walk on the side of a building, you're just going to be undefined. Now let's go ahead and take a look if we flip-flop the numbers. So negative 3, negative 2 is 0.2 and negative 3, 1 is 0.1. Now let's substitute. So we can say negative 2 for y2, 1 for y1, negative 3 for x2, and negative 3 for x1. And remember, the parentheses for the negative numbers will be helpful for when we do the order of operations. So let's go ahead and do that, where we have negative 2 minus 1 on top and negative 3 plus 3 on the bottom, because once again, we have, if you're subtracting a negative number, it becomes positive. And let's go ahead and do the next step, and we get negative 3 over 0, because negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3, and negative 3 plus 3 is 0, and negative 3 divided by 0 is undefined, and that is our answer. So as we can see, 3 different ways, the same answer, so we know we did it correctly. And let's take a look at the last example, where we have the points negative 3, 3, and the point 1, 1. Let's go ahead and label them, and negative 3, 3 will be 0.1, and 1, 1 will be 0.2. So now we can go ahead and substitute those numbers into the slope formula that is already on the screen. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can substitute 1 for y2. We can substitute 3 for y1. We can substitute 1 for x2. We can substitute negative 3 for x1 and put the parentheses around it. We have substituted correctly. Now we can do the order of operations, and that gives us negative 2 over 1 plus 3, because when we subtract a negative number, it becomes a positive, and that gives us negative 2 over 4. And we can go ahead and simplify that because those are both even numbers, or they're both multiples of 2. And so we can divide negative 2 by 2 to give us negative 1, and divide 4 by 2 to give us 2. And now we have the slope is negative 1 over 2. And that is our slope for this type of line or equation. Now let's take a look at delta y over delta x. And that gives us delta y is equal to negative 2 and delta x is equal to 4. So if we chose the 2 points that are closer together, you'll get the same slope, or the simplified slope, which is negative 1 over 2. So now let's go ahead and flip-flop our points and make negative 3, 3 as 0.2 and 1, 1 as 0.1. Let's go ahead and substitute. So we get 3 for y2, 1 for y1, negative 3 for x2, and remember the parentheses for the negative number, and lastly 1 for x1. Let's go ahead and now we can do the order of operations, and that gives us 2 over negative 3 minus 1, because 3 minus 1 is 2. And now we can go ahead and continue with the order of operations, and now we have 2 over negative 4, because negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. So once again we have to simplify our answer, and so we divide 2 by 2 to give us 1, and we divide negative 4 by 2 to get negative 2, and our slope is still going to be negative 1 over 2. And we are done with this question. We've done the slope 3 different ways, got the same answer, so we know we did it correctly. Now it is your turn, so go ahead and pause the video so you can take your time to answer these questions, and I will show you the answers in 3, 2, and 1. Here are the answers. If you got them correct, well done. If not, there's always tomorrow.